You're listening to Coding Blocks, episode 82. Subscribe to us and leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app.
And check us out at codingblocks.net where you can find show notes, example discussion, and a lot more.
Send your feedback, questions, and rants to comments at codingblocks.net. Follow us on Twitter at codingblocks or head to www.codingblocks.net and find all our social links there at the top of the page. And with that, I'm Alan Underwood.
I'm Joe Zach.
And I'm Michael Outlaw.
All right, and today we're going to be talking about identifying our weaknesses and filling in the gaps. Last episode we talked about complexity theory, and we've all been reading the Imposter's Handbook, and so we kind of thought it'd be fun to talk about kind of our own personal weaknesses and kind of how we thought about them and how we're identifying them and working on them. So I hope you guys enjoy.
Yep, and as we like to do up first are our reviews that you folks have left us, and we very much appreciate them. So I've got iTunes, and it looks like I got John James, maybe. C. Weldfitch, Change Perspective, and Steve 555 356 7. And huge thank you to you guys.
355 7? Is that
555 356 7? But I don't know why. I read numbers in threes, so 555 356 7.
I was thinking that was like some kind of phone number. Like 555. Just give me a call. 555 35 67. All right. And on Stitcher, Nick the Greek, Dizzle McShizzle, and Ketch.
Hey, I know Ketch. I might know some of the other guys too. Anyway, just for a quick note, I want to mention that I'm going to be speaking on search-driven applications. I'm going to be showing 3 quick prototypes. They're all built around a search engine and the Elastic Stack. So if you're in the Central Florida region, you should check out the Back-End Devs Meetup. And we'll have some links here. And if you aren't able to make it, you can actually follow along. I've got the slides actually already up on the GitHub, and it's the same with the apps too. So if you're interested, you can check it out there. It's still a work in progress, but I think it's kind of cool.
Hey, and if you want to know something cool, because we did the Docker episode, the way that he's got this on the GitHub link, if you want to see magic, go clone that repo and then type in Docker space composed Docker dash compose space up space dash D and watch magic happen. Your entire environment will spin up. You'll have Elastic the Elk stack running plus some additional things and a website. Like it's just awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. And just in that project, like some of the projects, there's Java, there's Python, there's JRuby, there's JavaScript stuff going on. There's a whole bunch of technologies, and you don't have to worry about any of it. You just type that command, and all that stuff is loaded in those little Docker containers. So you don't have to worry about any of that stuff, and that's the magic.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff.
All right, so first up, we're going to talk a little bit about how to kind of assess yourself. And I've got some notes in here from when I did the deliberate practice. So I was going to kind of talk about that a little bit, but really I'm foremost more interested in how you guys kind of picked. And, I don't even think we really introduced the topic, did we? I think I came at you guys and I said, pick 2 weaknesses, 2 things that you don't think you're very good at right now, and 1 strength in kind of the field of programming. And we're going to talk about in the air. And so I'm really curious how you guys determined what to choose there.
Before we dive into this, you've got how to assess yourself. Did anybody else hear like a Madonna song in their head when they saw this? You got to make them assess yourself. Hey.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. I heard Treat Yourself from Parks and Rec.
Very nice. Sorry, it's been bouncing around in my head since I read it, and I was like, get out.
Just waiting for the next verse of this song to go ahead.
Hey. Right, yeah.
There's little background dancers. Like whoever edits the video needs to put some background dancers behind Alan as he sings this.
That's awesome.
All right, it'll be done for sure.
So yeah, how did you pick?
No, you go first.
I don't know.
Tell you what, we'll get to that.
I'll go.
Okay.
Because I definitely struggled with this because the challenge to me, okay, so Joe's like, hey, pick 2 weaknesses, 1 strength, and that's what we're going to talk about, right? Like that's kind of like the central theme of it, right? And it was like, well, man, like how do I want to be honest, right? So I want to be honest with myself, right? So how do I find it? So I'm like Googling around like, hey, how do you like find your weaknesses. Like how do you determine skills gaps, right? Like I was going nuts.
Did you Google that? Really?
Oh my God, man. Like I have been stressing about this episode more than any other topic we've ever talked about, because it was like, how do you seriously, like, if you're trying to honestly find, take an introspective look at what your real weaknesses are, how do you first identify those, right? And it's number one, this is a very tough thing to Google, because if you do start Googling this type of topic, or at least maybe I was using all the wrong keywords, I would come back with article after article after article about identifying the skills gap within your organization and across your team, and how to like hire the right people that, can fill in those gaps kind of thing. But none of them were about like self-assessment kind of things. They were more like team-based kind of things, right? Or like, hey, these are the skills gaps that you need to be aware of, that, why you need this particular technology within your organization within the next 12 months. Like nothing was about, how to assess yourself, right? And but there were some articles though, like several, I'll put links to them in there, but like Slashdot, Quora, Reddit, all, topics like, what knowledge gaps do self-taught programmers generally have? What specifically is the knowledge gap between a strong self-taught programmer and a software engineering grad? Or what are some common knowledge gaps among programmers? Like, those are, kind of topics that you could find scattered around, but it was like really difficult to find, like, for me to try to find something that I could like truly assess myself. So I ended up just picking some things that, like, I probably didn't do it the way you guys did. So I'm curious to see how this is going to work.
I didn't Google a single thing. Like, that's crazy.
You're like, I already know what my weaknesses are. I don't need Google.
I actually, no, it was like, man, I don't have any weaknesses. This is easy. No. No. So like,
how did I know Alan would say that? How did I know? I should have called that. I should have like secretly texted Joe, like, Alan's going to say,
how far in, right? How far in? No, like,
oh God, we should have made a drinking game out of it.
We could have. No, seriously, like, you know how I did it? Like, it never crossed my mind that this was going to be hard to do. It was what things frustrate me. Those are usually my weaknesses. That's so the ones that we'll be talking about for me, it's the things that either frustrate me because when I think about them, I'm like, man, I have a gap there, or there are certain aspects of it that just drive me crazy because I don't know how to handle it properly or whatever. So that was it. It was literally just, hey, what are the things that I'm always feeling like I need to be better at somehow because it would help me in some substantial way. That was it. Like, I hate to say, but I think I put about 5 minutes of thought in it. And I was like, all right, which one of these am I going to pick? Right? Like, I need to grab a handful of these, and these are the ones that I'm going to do.
Yeah, so the way I kind of thought about it is I didn't have to think about it at all. Like, if I don't need 5 minutes, I need 0, because I have a constant anxiety loop running. And so I just had to do a quick aggregate poll there and, look at whatever was kind of, hurting my soul the most. And so it was pretty easy for me to come up with things I was weak against. Now, strong against, that was another thing, like, well, we'll get to that. It's definitely hard to say, like, this is something I feel good and confident with, my abilities towards. So that was real rough for me, but.
Man, you guys, I don't get it. Where's the confidence?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah.
We're 82 episodes in, guys.
No, but okay, it's funny you say that. So, because like one of the thoughts that I had while trying to like research this, because again, like my whole approach was like, okay, well, how do I assess the, like, I feel weak on everything. So it's like, I can't say that, right? So I was like, well, how do I give like where the honest thing, like how do I assess where the real things are and tackle those, right? But then I was like, why do I feel like that? Why do I feel like, I'm weak on everything? Because, am I? Maybe not. I don't know, because I can't find this way to assess it. But, I was like, well, I think there was a video that I watched where, it was from a Google I/O presentation from, I think, like 2008, 2009. and it was called something like the myth of the something programmer, myth of the
10X or whatever.
No, that does sound familiar though, doesn't it? No, it wasn't that one. It was a different one, but I'll find the title of it later. But basically, they were saying like, we kind of feel like this. It's a common feeling amongst our community because you have these people who are held up to like extremely high standards, right? And really, I mean, they didn't build these things that they're well known for overnight, and they definitely didn't do it by themselves, but they definitely take a lot of the credit, right? So Torvalds was one of the names that was mentioned about, with Linux, right? It was like, well, it's not like he just, came out overnight. Like he spent a lot of time building Linux before it became a thing, and it's only gotten better because of other people contributing to it. But yet he's the name that we think about, like he's the one on the pedestal that we think about, right? And so, if you're not on that pedestal, then it's easy to like, not think as highly of yourself, right? So, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. So I did a lot of preparation for that talk I did on deliberate practice. We did an episode on it too with Will Madison, who was awesome episode. Check it out. But in that research, I actually kind of found some objective kind of measures that you could do, and I kind of split things up into knowledge and skill. And so I was going to go over them real quick. LinkedIn and ProSite actually have self-assessments. We can go in there and kind of pick a subject like, say, C# or C++ or something, and they have some more somewhat softer type topics too. But you can actually do a little test, and you'll get a score, and that's kind of cool. So you can say like, well, I've been doing C# for 10 years now. Like I expect an A, and so if you don't get an A, then that's something to be interested in. I also thought of looking at the Stack Overflow survey results. Like that's not so much an objective way to kind of measure yourself, but like you can like look and see what other people are talking about. So if you've never heard of, say, React and it's or Angular, and it's pinning all of the top charts in a bunch of different fields, like that's probably some sort of gap in your knowledge. So I thought that was an interesting way of doing it. By the way, I didn't do any of these. So you could try building something. One thing I'm really bad about being like overconfident in my understanding of things. It's like, yeah, man, I know how Docker works. Like Kubernetes, I get it. I watched the 2-minute presentation. Like it's how you deploy stuff. Duh. And then I go to do it. And, 3 weeks later, I'm still like, mad fucking God, help me.
All right.
And he has been helping me. Thank you. Reading the Imposter's Handbook, listening to podcasts, going to meetups, stuff like that introduce new perspectives. That kind of helps you at least see your gaps, I think.
By the way, just circling back, I found that video. The name of it was The Myth of the Genius Programmer.
Okay.
There actually was an article, The Myth of the 10X, the myth of the 10X developer, which we talked about on the deliberate practice episode.
Yep.
So skills are different things. So skills really, I probably should add the LinkedIn Pluralsight stuff down in the skills section. I'll move that. But if that's something measurable, like you can do level 4 problems, JavaScript, time yourself, see how many you do in 20 minutes or whatever. That'll give you something you can plot, which is nice, but it doesn't really give you any sort of relative, like, you can't really take that and say like, well, how'd you do? It's kind of an awkward lunchtime conversation because like someone's going to be higher than the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as those soft skills, finding your friend and asking for specific feedback is something that I kind of found in those books I read to be really important. So, I think it's good to be able to say like, hey, Outlaw, you've seen my code. Like, what could I be better at? Don't tell me on the air. I don't want to hear it. But I think that would have been like a really smart approach for us to take. I didn't take it though. And I wanted to mention that it's never been easier. Like we've got all these collaboration tools, like it's kind of funny too. Like I had all this stuff like in notes. So like I knew like the textbook answers, but I thought it was so funny to me that like none of these were kind of intuitive to me until I kind of read over them and I was like, oh yeah, this is how I should do it. This is how I should do it. Is that how you guys are feeling about it? Not so much.
I don't know. We'll probably see when we get into them a little bit, but I will agree that everything always seems 20/20 in hindsight, right?
Yeah. And the last one I got here is the worst case scenario, basically assessing yourself. And that's if you could kind of like come up with like a list of pros and cons here and basically say, am I good at this, bad at this, kind of come up with some sort of scoring system for yourself. And this is totally what I did, even though I've got it as the worst case scenario. You got to be aware of the Dunningkruger effect. That's the one where it's like when you don't know something very well, like you tend to like overstate how good you are, and then once you get really good at something, you tend to under. So that's why assessing yourself is tough.
Yeah, that there've been podcast episodes on that alone.
Yep.
And how, people will rate themselves super high when they don't know what they don't know. And then when they realize the breadth of what they really don't know, then it's like, oh yeah, I'm a 3.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, like trying to like be honest with yourself, right?
And it's so hard because it's so big, right? Like we live in a sea that is just ginormous.
Yeah. And I feel like I live in a sea as in average.
There's nothing wrong with that. You're passing.
Sure. It's passing. Struggling.
For all you in school out there, disregard what I just said.
For all this dang time I put into it, you think I'd be flying high, right?
Right. So you're going to kick us off with the dev weaknesses, right?
Yeah. So now we're getting into the kind of the meat of things. Like we each pick 2 weaknesses and 1 strength. We're going to go round robin style, starting with the weaknesses. And I made the mistake of putting myself first. So I've been talking a lot.
Right. We're doing it in jam order.
Just
so that we keep these things straight here.
So for me, my first one, I've got modern UX development, which I mean JavaScript frameworks, things like Angular, also just things like general good design sense and kind of thinking like a user. Would you guys agree with that? Don't answer.
I mean, I've seen what you do. I don't think so. I mean, I've seen the UIs that you put together now, and this is actually where it was hard to pick weaknesses, because you could either get super broad, like you just said, UI frameworks, like, oh man, seriously, React, Angular, Vue, and we're just talking about web stuff. Then if you want to get into things like WPF or Spring, Swing in Java, like you can go so wide with the UI thing that it's like, wow, that's hard. So are you talking about just not knowing the frameworks, or are you talking about actually how to design a good UI that is usable by an end customer?
I feel like if lightning struck me right now and I just had like the best idea in the world for an app, I wouldn't know where to start, right? Like as for like the full picture kind of like user focused, like, if it comes to like writing web services, like I've got my preferences. I know what I like to do. When it comes to database tables, when it comes to C# architecture kind of organization, like I feel comfortable with that stuff. If I had to come up with like a user facing like mobile app or website or something, like all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, let me Google React versus Angular. I feel like I'm at like step 1 of this really big and complicated field.
Well, wait a minute. Wait. Because it sounds like on the one hand, it sounds like you're talking about information architecture. And then on the other hand, you jump into a framework and it's like, wait a minute, those 2 things don't have anything to do with each other.
Right.
So like knowing what components, what information should be present to the user at what time and where to put it and how to emphasize it is not the same thing as
choosing a framework.
Obviously choosing React.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at, because if you're talking about what he just said, how would I set this up so that not throw away the framework, but what would this screen look like so that a user could use this application in a useful way? Right. That's totally different than, should I pick Angular or should I pick React?
And there are degrees for that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so I just want to kind of focus in on what you're saying your weakness is. It sounds like your weakness is you don't have experience with every single UI framework on the planet, so it's hard for you to pick which one to use.
Yeah, like when I say this, like I've made like tons of websites, right? Like I've launched them, I've sold them. Hey, I've done all sorts of stuff, but I just never really felt comfortable with it. Like, so even to this day, like when it comes time to like, hey, let me make a website, like I always feel like I'm at, like step 1. So like even now, like if you're like, hey, Joe, go make a website. First thing I'm doing is going to like Bootstrap, Theme Forest to like try and get like some sort of stepping stone to kind of start on, because I feel like starting from scratch, like I know HTML, like I could type it, but as for like what to do, what kind of patterns are good, like what websites look like now, what things I like in a website, how I would build those things, what kind of JavaScript behaviors are like kind of in fashion and make sense for kind of modern apps, like I feel like I'm stuck 10 years ago.
This is where I would flip it on its head, though. So you're calling that out as a weakness because you don't have experience in all those things. And I'll call that a strength because you are aware that things have changed and that you need to go look and see what it is that you should be checking out. Like, you know about PWAs, you know about theme forest, you know about these things that can give you that that step up, right? That ability to leap ahead of where you'd be if you started from scratch. And that's, I mean, I know that's sort of a cop out and that might be kind of corny, but I honestly think that that's the kind of thing that comes with experience, right? Like, all three of us here would have that because we'd look at it and go, wait a second, you know, the landscape's constantly changing. What I did 5 years ago is not the same thing that I need to do today. And I think that only comes with experience. And so while, yes, it's a weakness because you don't know them all, it's also a strength because you are aware of it. It's that whole you know what you don't know thing, right?
I suppose so. I suppose so. I'll take it. I mean, hey, you know, keep going. You know, what else am I good at? But no problem. So I'll take that. But for now, we want to go on to you. Like, what did you come up with for a weakness there, Alan?
All right, so I kind of had to tack another one on here at the last minute because I realized that we went specifically for dev weaknesses. I'm going to throw in the first one that I did and kind of a toss away. One thing that I struggle with the most is time boxing. As a manager / developer / you know, architect or whatever, the biggest problem I have is, and this isn't development related, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's really tough when you're a manager and you have guys that have just great ideas all the time, right? And the problem that you run into is if you have a 30-minute box for a particular meeting and you get into a really good conversation about the direction something should go, or why haven't we looked at this, or here's another solution that might be better, I have a really hard time cutting those conversations off, because I don't like killing creativity. I think some of the beauty and some of the fun of being a developer is the magic that comes with it, right? And it's the magic that only happens when you're allowed to have that creativity bug in your head, right? And you're allowed to get it out in the open, and it spreads. It's contagious, right? As more people start thinking about it, then they're mentally building on to that, right? Like, they're creating those building blocks. On the flip side, it's really hard because it's so easy for that time to just disappear throughout the day, right? I mean, you look up, you've been in meetings for 4 hours and you were only scheduled for an hour and a half. And it's like, man, and I'm terrible at it. Because I really don't like killing ideas. And on the flip side, I just don't know what to do about it. Being completely honest, basically what ends up happening is I end up just working more hours in the day because I feel like I didn't get anything done in the earlier times because, you know, so I don't know if you guys want to say anything about that, but that is one of the struggles I have that's not necessarily dev related, but just as a person in development. If you become somebody that people rely on, this will happen to you more and more and more throughout your career. So,
what do you think about that, Outlaw?
Yeah, I mean, I understand it's basically like time management is kind of what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I've definitely known some people who, like, I kind of want to phrase it as like they respect their time highly. Right. And so if you get into a conversation with them that isn't what they want to say, then they're like, nope, I'm shutting you down. You schedule a different meeting for that because I only allowed, you know, for X amount of time to talk to you about X. And, you know, we need to stay on topic. Right. And so I'm definitely bad, though, about the wandering conversations. You know, if someone throws an idea out there, I'll start pursuing that idea with them and let's see where it goes, right? So I'm definitely bad about it. Probably something I should try to get better at as well, I guess.
That's what felt like ounce of time boxing. I was like, oh, crap. Yeah, me too.
It's hard. I mean, it really is. And I get it, right? Like, there are times that I will say I have 30 minutes. I have a drop dead. We get out what we need to get out at the beginning. If we want to use the rest of the time, fine. Otherwise, moving on. But it is hard, and it's a struggle as somebody that believes that the main reason you end up with really good people is because those people are allowed to think and create solutions that they're proud of, that carry things further, right? So now moving on from that one. Wait, Joe, did you have any thoughts on it before I switch to the real one?
It reminded me of some of the stuff I'd read about the differences between like leadership and management, where like leadership is all about thinking big and like thinking about where to go, and management is about kind of how to get there, and is more tactical rather than strategic. And so I thought it was really interesting, and like it just kind of like you said for mine was like recognizing the balance between like tactical and strategy, and like big thinking, and also focusing on current deadlines. Like sounds like a strength to even recognize that.
It's hard. It feels like a weakness because I feel like I'm constantly fighting that one, and I know it internally, but I don't know. I struggle with it. So on to the other one, and this one should be fairly quick because we've already done an episode on it. Targeted learning. I'm terrible at it. I'm absolutely terrible at targeted learning. So I'll set out to create a podcast app. And as I get into it, I'm like, well, there's this identity framework in C#. I need to know how that works. You get in there and you're like, well, wait a second. If I use that, then I have to set up an identity server. And if I do that, then I can tie it into this thing over here. And wait a second, there's this Azure Key Vault, and I really don't want to store my security credentials in my application. So I need to learn how to use this. But wait a second, I can't do that because I need to then go figure out how identity management works in Azure. And
there might be more than one of me that use this thing at the same time tonight while I'm developing it. So I need to make sure it can scale to a billion users. It's got to be
concurrent. I mean, so I am absolutely terrible at targeted learning. And I think the episode that we did where Joe was convincing us that we were learning wrong was a very valid point, because targeted learning should be, what is your goal at the end of this, right? Like, are you really trying to sharpen a skill or create a skill versus I'm just going to go tinker, because that's typically what I end up doing. And then I never finish it because I've gone down 80 rabbit holes. I'm at the center of the earth at this point, and I'll never dig my way back out.
You found Alice.
I did.
You're changing the light bulb, and like, what's going on? You're like, well, to change the light bulb so I could see the keyboard, so I could replace the key, so I could type in the password, so I could,
Dude, my wife tells me about this all the time. Like, I'll be out, I don't know, cleaning up the garage, and I'll see something. I'm like, I didn't even remember I had this. I got to go use it, right? So it's like, man, that saw's been hidden forever. Let's turn that thing on and see what it does. So, I'm just that guy. Like, I have a real hard time. If I don't have an end goal in mind, then like a very strict one, then I'm just bouncing all over the place.
Does it have anything to do with like your excitement about the goal itself? Like, are you more likely to wander when it's a unappetizing goal?
No, I don't think so. I actually don't believe it has anything to do with what the finish line might be. So there's a difference, right? Like, when I have something that I have to get done, I'm very focused on getting it done. And I'm usually pretty pragmatic. Like, I don't write garbage code, but I don't write the most elegant code in the world. I'll walk that line, right? And I'll get to the finish line. But if it's a learning exploration, doesn't matter how exciting it is at the end. It could be the most glorious thing ever. But if I got this shiny little thing that swam by me on the side, I'm over there. Like, that's all there is to it.
Oh, God. What a funny way to put that.
So what about you? You struggle with that kind of stuff, or?
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes it's just the mechanics of the things, though, that I guess is kind of what you're describing. It's like, sometimes you get lost in just the mechanics of it. I don't know, like maybe you want to play around with React. It could like, we can take this even much simpler, right? Like, you want to play around with React and pick up React. And you're like, well, I need to make this thing look good. So, hey, the latest version of Bootstrap.
Right.
Oh, what all they change? Oh, so now you start going down that rabbit hole, and then it's like, well, you really only wanted to focus on React, but now that you've gotten into it, you also picked up, latest version of Bootstrap as well. So, yeah. I think we all fall into that.
And I will say, I'll flip this one too. I think it's a big weakness. Like, not targeted learning is a weakness, but it's also one of the reasons why I have the breadth of knowledge and awareness of technologies that I do, because I'm naturally curious, and I have a hard time not crawling my way through every little thing that shows up. So, It doesn't allow me to really sharpen a particular skill that I go after, but it does open up my world of, oh, this is interesting. I saw this, right? So,
Yeah.
Did you know the term yak shaving dates back to Ren and Stimpy?
Yak shaving?
Yeah, that's the word for like kind of like finding one more thing to do before you can do the thing. Like next thing you know, you're shaving the yak.
And I loved Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah.
Am I the only one though that when Alan was talking about time boxing, kind of thought that we were going to go to Pomodoros?
Oh man, I'm terrible. Those drive me crazy.
Yeah, I should probably try that.
Yeah.
Were you doing Pomodoros there for a while, Outlaw? I forget.
I was, yeah. I mean, it was kind of annoying because not because they were annoying, but just I was trying to find like a good app for it. And, feel free to write in with some suggestions. But yeah, because I really wanted one that like would sync to the watch, and then that way I could just like start and stop them on the watch. I didn't want to like have to bother touching the phone or anything for it, because then that would be like a distraction right there. Like, oh, there's an email, or ooh, I want to play a game or something. Right, something would come up.
Yeah, developer's life is full of distractions.
Right.
All right, so it's your turn.
Yeah. So,
what did you come up with on Google?
Yeah, I totally different. So, well, maybe different. Let's see. So, because I couldn't find a way to like what I wanted to find, apparently Joe found some tests where he could have gone to and tested himself on something, and that's probably what I was looking for, and somehow that never came back in my searches. So instead, I just kind of took more of like, I guess maybe more of a pragmatic approach. Like, what's something that I want to be better at that I don't feel like I'm good at today? And so, number one on my list was I really want to be better at Python. Like, I want to be like if Python was my daily driving language, like that I want to be there, right? But it's not my daily driver, and so that's why, like, I get kind of frustrated with it, where when I am working in Python, then I'm like, wait a minute, I can't even think of a good example, but, I want to split this matrix up and, get rid of these other columns out of it or something like that. And it's like, oh, wait, I can't remember. How do I do that? And then because that's the thing that I hate about some of these things that we pick up, some skills that we learn and we pick up, is because, as we discussed before, if you don't regularly practice that, then you lose that muscle memory. And that's my pain with Python, is that because it's not something I use on a daily basis, I'd like to, but I don't. And I think it's like, from everything that I read, it's like definitely one of the top growing, very important languages to be on top of. And it's like, oh, I kind of want to know something about this thing, right?
So is that a weakness to you because of the discipline you want to go into more, or just because it's a popular language that you feel like you're missing out on?
Definitely the discipline part is a big part of it, but just because it's not necessarily that it's the second one about, because it is going to be a big thing. I think that's why it's important, though. But I just feel like I still stumble on some basic things that, like in a C# or a JavaScript, for example, that I don't struggle with as much. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it sounds like it frustrates you to do this thing that you want to be totally not frustrating and easy.
Yes.
So this weakness grew out of a frustration as well. I'm pretty sure that's what all these are going to end up being, is things that we feel like should be easy to us that just don't feel that way.
I might surprise you.
Oh, okay, cool.
All right. Well, now I want to know.
All right, yeah. You want to go next?
No, I'll share something else after my next one.
Cool.
I'll tease it. How's that?
All right.
Alan, was targeted learning part of your kind of first one?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
That's what I was saying. The time boxing was really more just, it wasn't dev related. It was more personal productivity management, time management. I don't know. That's why I just wanted to put it in that one.
Yep. So for my next one, a couple years ago when I was doing some job kind of research, I was like, I want to leave the job I'm at, no doubt about it. What do I want to go into next? And I kind of look at different like opportunities for like kind of employment, like consulting versus whatever, big company, small company. And then I also did this big Venn diagram where I was like, there's security, there's mobile, there's machine learning, there's e-commerce. And I kind of put like the big categories. I don't remember what all was on. I think I ended up with like 7 circles, and I kind of had like some overlapping and stuff, and it was real cute. I should have saved it. And and I think about now, like the circles that 5-6 years later, whatever, however long it's been, there's circles that I've definitely spent more time in, and there's ones that have totally dropped off my radar. And so the modern UI development is kind of one of those circles where like I felt like I just kind of like dropped out of the race on. Like I haven't built a Angular 1, 2, or 4 app. I just like jumped off that train, and now I don't know how to get back on it. But the second weakness I kind of felt like I totally just missed the train on, and now it feels like it'd be really hard to get on, is machine learning. I feel like it's this big, huge field, and it seems like more and more companies are doing really cool stuff that you can't do any other ways. I can't, whatever little app I do with like, SQL Server and whatever is not going to be able to compete with like the sophisticated algorithm that's just has the same data, but these people have this better and stronger vocabulary with it and know how to solve problems with it that I just don't even know how to approach. And I'm not even aware that there is a problem. So I've got a lot of anxiety about kind of missing out on the whole machine learning trend.
That's interesting. I mean, Outlaw's probably got more insight on that as he's looked into it a little bit deeper, but that's where I feel like certain things like Azure services and even AWS, right? Like they make some of that stuff almost plug and playable to where you can play with things and not have to have a ton of knowledge, right? There's data scientists doing a lot of that stuff for you, and you can leverage the tools that people have built and play with them. Yep. I think you've even left links on some of our show notes on like the Azure Learning Labs and all that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, there's just I get it though. That's a big one. That's all you hear about anymore is machine learning this and machine learning that.
But I get it though. It's a daunting, subject, right? And there's different approaches, because I've thought about this topic before, because there's the people who are trying to come up with the new algorithms, and then there are people that are just trying to like use the existing stuff. So when you're talking about just using the tools, like you're not trying to create a new and better algorithm to learn something. You're just trying to use what's already there, but you still have to have a pretty, good understanding of how to use it, what it means, like what kind of errors to look for, or what kind of results to look for, and how to tweak those. So there's still a lot of detail there.
Yeah, and I feel like for my current basically step 0 of knowing like these things exist and that's it. Like for me to get kind of up to speed to where I could feel like I could solve like real world like business problems with machine learning, like I'm looking at a huge time investment at this point, and knowing how me and how I operate, it's just not going to happen.
I mean, I think it's very possible, though. I don't think it's impossible for you to pick it up at all.
No. But I don't think based and relative to all the things that I want to do with my free time, like outside of work, this doesn't rank high enough for me to really invest time in.
So it's a weakness because you feel like it's sort of the train's left the station and you're standing there looking at it, right?
Yeah.
But I guess on the flip side of that, like you said, you look at what you have available time-wise and what interests you. And it sounds like it's something that interests you, but it's not high enough to really register in terms of dedicating the time, right?
Yeah, I've elected to have this chink in my armor. I said I'd rather have my armor stronger in other areas and just let this one go.
Yeah, and that one's fair. I mean, there's a lot of those things that we all have to pick and choose, right? I mean, we can't learn it all. There's too much. I mean,
there's only so much time in the day.
Right. Yep. And I mean, if you take it a step further, right? Like, so machine learning, I would almost argue is sort of, I don't want to say dying because that's a terrible term, but like AI is a new huge focus on things, right? The the learning aspect of things, not just finding models and patterns and that kind of stuff. It's the evolving that kind of thing. So, I mean, there's always going to be bigger and better. And
so the way I kind of thought about weaknesses, and like now that I say it and we talked about it, I kind of think like, when I said strengths and weaknesses, like it seems like I should have come up with things like estimating or time boxing. It seems like, or code organization or something. Those seems like the answers I should have come up with. But for whatever reason, when I kept thinking about this, I kept coming down to thinking like, if I were to assess myself on kind of like a A through F score for like, say, functional programming, D minus, like machine learning, straight up F, like the UI UX, like I feel that's more like a, C minus there, because I feel like I can pick up with it, but like, I feel like I'm not as far behind because I've got a solid understanding of HTML and vanilla JavaScript and maybe even CSS, like those individual skills I'm higher on. Just overall picture, I don't feel like I'm where I should be given my years of experience, especially doing websites. I feel like I should be at A+, and I'm far from that. But machine learning is one where I'm just like, I'm an F and I'm staying F.
And it bugs you though, right? Like it's something that bugs you. Like you want to have that knowledge, you want to know more about it, but you just don't want to dedicate the time to it.
Yeah, if I go to lunch with some people and they're talking about the mobile dev that they're doing, like I can at least say like, oh, I've got Android Studio. I've built like 2 crappy apps and put on my phone, or, I've at least got some sort of understanding of what's going on. I know about Kotlin. I know what's going on in the world. Like machine learning, if like people are talking about 2 different classification algorithms or something, like I don't even know if classification algorithms are a thing, right? So.
Yeah. All right. So, Alan, what was your second?
So mine was almost what we've been covering, or what we started to cover in the Imposter's handbook. So mine is, and this stems from being an employee at Amazon and seeing how their interview process is. And it's really frustrating / annoying / a weakness of mine. Just when you start talking about almost like theoretical type things from school. When you were in school, that's what you did, right? Like you'd learn this stuff and those were the practice things you did. But like when you go into an interview for like an Amazon or something and they start talking about complex like tree searches and different types of sorts and all that kind of stuff, like that's a gap. And it's a gap because I haven't done that stuff in so long that I've forgotten what I've forgotten. Right? Like I don't even remember any of it anymore. And that's a weakness, and it frustrates me. Like when we start talking about big O notation, or we talk about, more efficient algorithms, or a way to do a tree sort or a tree search or something like that. Like it's one of those things that is a real mental exercise, right? And it's a weakness. Like if I were to go into an interview today and they said, what's the best way? I would have some data structures in my mind that I would use to accomplish a task, but because I'm not in that learning mode of like the education type side of things, the more theoretical, the more I can't think of the word right now, but because I'm more
academic, algorithmic,
academic. That's what I was looking for. Because I'm not in the academic side of the world, I would have to really sit down and go through something like the Cracking the Coding interview book and like really work through it from cover to cover to get my mind back in that mode, right? Or I'd have to go, as a matter of fact, I have a link that I'll share here that is interesting. It was somebody that basically who had gone on interviews, super technical interviews, and made a list of these various different things that that he found frustrating in interviews because they were either gaps in his knowledge or whatever, and they were super academic, a lot of them. So that's a weakness of mine, is just being able to quickly look at something and say, that's a log, in log in big O notation or something like that. And it's a frustration, right? Because it's one of those things that I knew at one time and I don't use it in day to day. And so I would have to go back and reinforce all that.
Mm-hmm. We didn't mention before, but we actually got some really excellent feedback last episode. And I kind of don't want to touch it because like I feel like it's really hard to talk about. And some of the points that people were making in the comment section were like really kind of poignant and like I just don't have the background to really discuss them intelligently. However, there are people in the comments, notably the author of the book, the Imposter Handbook, Rob Conery, who really had some great insight and had some things to say about that. So if you're interested in that episode, I just wanted to mention, sorry to sidetrack, but I thought that seemed to fit in there.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say go look at episode 81's comments because there was some great stuff. And this is where academia plays a huge role, right? Like when you start talking about the theories and all that stuff behind it, like it's a big shift from everyday real world development problems to theory, right? And to conceptual things that you don't necessarily use in day-to-day work. And so it's kind of frustrating that you've got, all these years of experience. And if somebody comes to me and says, hey, we need to build this out, I can tell you exactly off the top of my head what I think would work out really well. But then you start talking about how would you do this binary search thing. It's like, oh man, let me whiteboard this, right? This is going to take me a little while and it's going to hurt my brain and I'm going to need to take a nap, right? It's just, I don't know. Those kind of things still frustrate me a little bit.
Yeah.
I hear you. Outlaw, what do you think?
So it's kind of interesting to hear Alan's take on this. I took the approach of algorithms. So kind of along the lines, like if I were to like blur what both of you two said, that's kind of where that one is, because it was kind of like, well, it's been a long time. If you had to come up with the, a Bellman-Ford algorithm off the top of your head, it'd be like, I've definitely read about it recently. I don't remember. Right. Like, those are the kind of things where it's like, just, I don't know, is it a muscle memory that I need? So maybe kind of along the lines of what Joe was saying with machine learning, like, I'm probably not going to bother with it, but it's one of those things where I kind of feel guilty. Like, I should probably know that algorithm, like off the top of my head. Right. Or, other algorithms, like just like, because that way this is where the guilt comes in, is because like by knowing them off the top of your head, then when you need them and you can recognize when you should be using them, because otherwise if you don't, then you don't know what you don't know. And then you might start going down a bad path and create a really bad solution to a problem where there's a well-known, trusted algorithm for it.
It's just like design patterns.
So those, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I actually, we've talked about this guy before way back, episode 48. There is a guy out there named John Washam. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I'll have a link to it, but he basically created he basically set out that, hey, I want to get hired at Google as a engineer.
I remember that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he set out this outline for himself and spent like the next 8 months working on it. Right. He eventually ended up getting hired by Amazon instead of Google. So it's kind of humorous that you brought that up. But, he had a lot of information in there. Right. And, a lot of it on like all kinds of different books, if you wanted to study on data structures, if you want to study on algorithms, here's books on C# to study there. Here they are in Python, here they are in Java, whatever, right? Just a wealth of information in this, this GitHub repo, that I'll include a link to, but, it also just totally, I want to come back to some of this, but one of the resources he has out there is flashcards that he made for himself as a way to study these things. And man, I went through them and I was like, oh man, I'm a moron. Like trying to go through some of these. I'm going to hit you guys up with some questions later, but it was awesome. So that was another one where I was like, well, if I had to think of something, since I can't find like a way to like truly test this, find like, because maybe there's something more basic, then that's something I feel like there's probably a bunch of algorithms that I don't know off the top of my head anymore that I should probably go back and practice. and regain that muscle memory.
So we almost had the same last weakness there.
Yeah, I was like, dang it, Alan cheated. He picked mine.
In fairness, so everybody knows, none of us have put notes in this one because we didn't want each other to know what our weaknesses were. So,
but this was another thing too, though. So because like, and this kind of goes along the same lines with this, because I thought about it like from another point of view of like, well, I don't know that it's necessarily a developer weakness, maybe, but I guess it kind of is. Interviews, right? Like,
yeah, I think that's totally legit.
The technical interview, right, as a weakness. And, you know, I mean, again, John's repo here is all about studying for, you know, the technical interview for Google, right? So I wasn't sure like how that one got classified as. That's why I didn't, you know, end up going with it, you know, because I was kind of like, well, that's kind of maybe a soft skill, I guess. Like,
no, it's both. And to be fair, I think that what we just said with our algorithms, academia type stuff, that is a huge part of why they're important, is for the interview, especially if you're interviewing with a Microsoft, a Google, an Amazon, an Oracle, any of the big software companies out there. You got to have those, right?
Yeah.
And then there is the soft skill side of things. And that's, you know, we've talked about it before and we'll reiterate it here. If you're going for an interview with a company, it doesn't matter what company it is. It doesn't matter whether it's one of the big software companies or not. If you don't do your homework like you would for a test beforehand, then you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? You should at least polish up on things so that when you go in there, you have a confidence. There's some muscle memory to whatever you're doing. And it'll ease some of the tension. The last thing you want to do is go in and be overconfident and look like a fool when you walk out.
Yeah, I mean, this totally made me fall down a rabbit hole, though, because I started approaching this topic as I was trying to, like, again, I was coming at it from the point of view of, like, well, how can I, like, truly assess this, right? So that's where I spent, like, a good bulk of my time trying to prepare for this thing. But then when I remembered about this guy's repo, I was like, oh, yeah, I wonder, you know, like, what would it take? Like, what does Google, what would a Google interview be like, right? And so, you know, I found some resources. I'll include some links to these, but, you know, how Google hires, what that process is like. And Google even has, like, their guide, their developer guide to grow your technical skills with Google.
That's
right?
Awesome.
And it was like a whole other set of, like, you know, we've talked about other learning resources like Pluralsight countless times, right? I think lynda.com has come up.
Now
you know,
LinkedIn Learning.
Yeah. So Google has their own set of, like, you know, learning that you could do. And you can start with, like, hey, I want the foundations that I need to start with, versus like, oh, I already am experienced. Like, let's start with advanced learning, versus, hey, I'm a teacher. What do I need to know in order to be able to teach somebody? Right. Like, so it was a pretty neat little resource that they had there. But one thing that, though, was that I read multiple times about the Google interview specifically was that if anyone is listening to this wants to hire at Google, that it was kind of like, don't put it off. Like, it's better to go after it sooner rather than later, because, like, even John in one of his write-ups was saying, like, hey, you know, I spent these 8 months trying to study for this thing, right? And that was 8 months. Like, maybe I could have put towards, you know, putting an app in the App Store, you know, working on whatever other skills he might have wanted to work on, right? So, you know, even though he left the thing kind of thinking like, well, you know, maybe I spent my time wisely, or maybe I could have spent it better. And one of the thoughts was that specifically at Google, the more experience you have, the longer you've been a developer, the more they expect, the harder it is, the harder the interview would be. And so one of the articles I was reading was like, hey, if you are just out of school, for example, and you want it, and Google was like, your target it would be better to go after that as soon as possible rather than saying, I'm going to wait a year or two and get some experience and then come back to Google, because then that interview is going to be harder.
I guess you do it once to you get kind of a sense of what you need, and you might get the job the first time. So, spend 1 month, give it a shot. And then if that doesn't go through, you got 7 more months to try again.
Yeah.
But it is totally true. If you're coming into one of those big companies as an intern or somebody fresh out of school, they'll bring you in because their hopes are if they see the spark in you, then they're going to train you up and you're going to be a rock star in their team that they got in early on. So you do have a better opportunity getting into companies early on, especially big companies that hire a lot of engineers, right? Like going to a small company that needs to put out a product fast, maybe not. But if we're talking to one of the big ones out there, yeah, man, the earlier the better.
All right. And just kind of curious if you guys had any sort of like honorable mentions, like things you thought about, but just we didn't really talk about or touch on.
I see you got some there that are pretty good.
Yeah, I got estimating and just regular, not even so much code organization, although I could definitely use a serious dose of that too, but just organization. Like I feel like I'm always trying different techniques for organization, and I'm always like, I think it's just not like a natural strength of mine, and maybe I need to keep working on it, but like I'm always trying bullet journaling or to-do-asks or different kinds of things for staying on top of the ball. And like for the most part, like those things work for me, but I just never really feel comfortable. And I always just feel like I'm, on the verge of dropping some ball I don't want to drop. I'd rather make a deliberate decision than have something just slip off my radar by accident.
Yeah, the estimating I think is impossible. It's so hard. I mean, It really is. The organization, I'll just say inbox 1000. All you people with this inbox 0 garbage, get out of here. Like your inbox is a search box. That's all you need to know.
It's funny, like I feel like at the end of the day, like I'm happy with kind of the results, like the way I kind of track tasks and stuff for the most part. Like I feel like I check them off, like not that many things slip through the cracks. It happens sometimes. So overall, I'm happy with the outcome. It just for me, like I feel like I'm constantly like thinking about organizing. Like I'm frequently like kind of slap myself on the wrist. Like, did you write that down first? Or like I feel like I'm constantly struggling to keep organized. So it's like I'm running on the hamster wheel.
Yeah, I get that, especially when you're actually the organization personal isn't that hard. The organizing of multiple people is really hard, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're trying to get answers from 6 or 7 different people or something, that is just incredibly difficult.
So I think what I'm kind of talking about, like, I'm like, I go in, so like first thing, 9 o'clock in the morning, whatever. And someone's got, there's like 2 emails from the night before. So I'm like, okay, add that to the to-do list. And then of course the third is like the one thing like I really want to focus on. And as I'm talking to one person, like someone else kind of pings. And so I add that to the list. And so, I feel like my system's working. I just hate that I'm constantly like, oh yeah, the list. Oh yeah, the list. It never feels natural to me. I don't know if you guys ever felt that way or how you guys keep track of that stuff.
I don't keep a list.
Yeah.
I mean, in my head.
Yeah.
See, I feel like everyone else can just keep it in their head, and like I constantly have to be like diligently like writing stuff down and like Xing them out.
The only thing that I typically put in a list, I will flag things like in my email for a follow-up if it's something that has to be done by next week or something, right? Like, and then that way I'll get the reminder and I'll look at it, every day to make sure, okay, have I followed up on this? But if it's just the daily stuff, usually I'm pretty decent at managing that stuff internally. Because managing lists, they would drive me crazy.
See, I hate that you can do that without a list.
To be fair, I'm pretty good at it, but it's just like you said, some things fall through. But I'm not convinced that they wouldn't have fallen through even on a regular list, right? Because it's like you said, you get pulled in 80 different directions, and it's like, I forget. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel you on the estimating, though. That is
so hard.
We ought to do an episode on it, except I really don't want to.
No, I really don't, because then we'd have to estimate what we're going to come up with on the episode.
I really wish that we wouldn't even call them estimates, just guesstimates.
They really are. And that's the frustrating thing, right? Like it's danged if you do, danged if you don't, right? You pick one that you think is a fair estimate, and then you're going to get questioned about it like, oh, that's too long, or wait, or you really think it's only that long? And it's like, man, really? Come on.
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
If we just called it guess, then no one would second guess it.
Yeah, well, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I got 2 kids that would probably argue it. So,
All right, well, you want to pick up with the strengths after the call to action?
yes, let's do that. So with that, guys, we appreciate it. Thank you for the reviews you've left. We got some really good ones this last go around. Some great suggestions as well that we'll try and squeak into a show here in the near future. So thank you for taking the time and going up and leaving us some kind words and for clicking those stars, whether it be in iTunes or Stitcher. And if you haven't done so and you like us a little bit and you would like to go up and put a smile on our face, you can do so by heading to codingblocks.net/review and click on one of those things over there and go leave us some kind words. We would super appreciate it.
All right. And with that, let's get ready to survey. And thank you, Mike from Slack, for recommending that. That's been a fun little way to introduce this.
It is.
So last episode, we asked, how important is it that developers have an understanding of computer science-y topics? Your choices are no. Or, yeah, I guess it's good. Or, it's not mission critical, but I prefer working with people who know their O from their theta. Or, lastly, super important, and I can prove it mathematically if you accept my base case. So let's pick, Alan, you go first.
Man, you know what? This one's hard for me. I think, and I'm basing this only on our Slack group. I think that we're going to see people that are passionate about this and they're going to say it's not mission critical, but I prefer working with people who know their O from their theta. And I don't think this is going to be a runaway, so let's go with 27%.
All right. Well, I guess then I'm going to go with, yeah, I guess it's good at 27%.
So both of you, 27%. Joe is, yeah, I guess it's good. And Alan is, it's not mission critical, but I prefer working with people who know their O from their theta.
Yep. One of us is going to win.
And that would be Joe. It's not you.
Really?
Yeah, no, it was Alan. But you're both like
way under.
You both picked the top choices, but you were both way under as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did this end up being? I'm going to say 50.
48% of the vote.
Okay.
Was it's not mission critical,
Hmm.
and then 40 was, I guess it's good.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, the thing is when you run into people, I think that it all boils down to when somebody sees code that is so obvious that people didn't have a base understanding of what was going on, it really angers them, right? And that's why I chose that one, because I think that's where if there weren't those silly, just, I don't know, naive mistakes made, then I think that people wouldn't be as passionate about it. But when they see something, it's like, man, if you would have just been in a class, then that would have been avoided.
Right.
So, yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, at least we weren't super surprised.
Nah.
So for this episode survey, we ask, do you regularly evaluate your weaknesses in an effort to strengthen them? And your choices are, oh my God, daily. Or, I try to pick up a new skill or get better at an existing one every few months. Or, yeah, but realistically, probably only once or twice a year. Or, I learn what I want to learn when I want to learn it. Or, no, that's why I listen to you guys. And lastly, why? I already know everything I need to know. I dare someone to pick that one.
I think Alan just voted for it.
Wait, I don't know what you're talking about.
Probably. Watch that one be the runaway winner.
Yeah, it might be. All right, so back into the topic. So we talked about our dev weaknesses, and so now I think we all had a tough time for this, except for maybe Alan, talking about our development strengths.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And stick with the same format. Funnily enough, I think that relative to how much time I put into it or keep onto it, I think I tend to actually do really well with algorithmic, and despite the topic last week, like algorithmic and kind of academic-y type stuff. And I think that this is because in job interviews too, like technical interviews, I think this is because I always had a chip on my shoulder about not graduating from college. And so I banged my head against the Project Euler wall for so long to get to where I did in there. Like I've done a lot of code wars, I've done code fights, I've done a little bit of hacker rank. Like I've always kind of gone after these kind of problems. And so whenever I see like a binary T problem or something, like I feel like instantly like I want to know, or if somebody I know goes on an interview, like I always want to hear what questions they were asked and like start thinking about it. There's a Slack person I talked to, Vaughn, if you're listening to, that's been doing a bit of interviewing, and so he's been talking about we've been talking about their problems a little bit, and every time it says like it's a change problem where they give you the quantities, like it doesn't matter that at public shopping, all of a sudden I'm like, hold on, honey, take the cart. I'm gonna be in the bread aisle like trying to figure out this problem. Like I just there's something I really like about those types of problems and like recursion and pretty much the algorithmic side of things, where like if I hear a problem, like I want to solve it, I want to solve it in good performant time. So, I don't know why I kind of gravitate to it, but it's something that I've traditionally done well with. So
that's awesome. And to be fair, you're only like a couple of classes away from graduating, right?
Yeah, and it's all like science classes.
But you still got that chip.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta have something that drives you.
But so much of it, I think, was those Project Euler problems. Because it's one where brute forcing doesn't work because it takes too long. So like if you try to do like the brute force solution to a problem, like it might take your computer 24 hours to compute. So like you don't have a choice but to solve every problem in close to optimal solutions. So like there were some times where like even like the beginning problems I first started, it's like problem number 7, I remember being just a nightmare, but I just kind of kept going with it. And after a time, like now, whenever I go into an interview or someone tells me an interview problem, like so many times, like my mind immediately jumps back. I'm like, that sounds like number 33. So I feel like I've cheated in a lot of ways because I've kind of put that time in, and so many problems are similar to the problems that I've done that I've just kind of built up that skill, I think.
Well, you finished most of it, right? Or if not all of it.
No, not at all. It's so much harder. So like there's people out there that are like laughing in their boots. I think I got to level 2, which is actually level 3. Before they lost their database. But I still have all my problems checked in, so I could go through and redo it again. But yeah, they start at level 0. So you start at nothing, and you go level 0, level 1, level 2.
Man, that's coolness.
And it probably goes up to like level 6 or something. So it's embarrassing to even say like, I got to level 2, but man, I worked hard to get there.
Yeah, I've done a few of them, and I just ain't nobody got time for that. All right, so mine is somewhat along the same lines. It's not algorithms, but I think what I'm pretty good at is taking complex problems and breaking them down into workable solutions. And I'm good at learning what I don't know in order to accomplish whatever that is. Like I think so I guess the way that I'd put that is I have the ability to visualize something in terms of the pieces that make it work, right? And then on top of that, I'm pretty resourceful when it comes to, if I don't know how to get something done, I know how to find out how to get it done so that I can either help do it myself or, help somebody else put the pieces together. So
resourcefulness.
Yeah, I would say that's what it is, like resourceful in learning how to make the solution work. So that's one of the things. So it's problem solving, right? Like it's one of the reasons I like programming. I love problem solving. Did you guys, like growing up as a kid, did you ever do those? They give you the grids that had people on the left and places on the top, and it's like, hey, Sally visited this today.
Yeah.
What did Jane not do? And it was like, oh, Yeah. I mean, I would sit there for hours doing those, right? Like that was fun to me. I love solving problems, and it's just like a big puzzle for me, and I enjoy it.
Like Sally went to the high school, Joe bought the perfume,
Right.
and Michael likes dogs.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Now, which one of these did this?
Yep.
So yeah, that's mine.
Yeah, I kind of had a trouble with this part of it because it was like, well, how do you? But again, because I could never find the stupid assessment, it was like, well, I don't know what to say that my strength is. So like how do you really come across with something that doesn't sound like overly cocky or anything? But I guess one thing that I thought was, well, if I were to take like an introspective look, like I think I'm pretty good at paying attention to detail.
Oh God,
For
yes.
sure.
Like
Yes.
You asked me, like, we
I
talked
felt a
about
little
this.
reassured by those responses, by the way.
Before he goes further, there is nobody more detail oriented than Outlaw.
No.
Like probably on the planet. Like if there's 9,999 permutations, he's thought of them all.
I feel
Yeah.
like, you know, like when, like, sadly, you know, it's weird to bring up Steve Jobs' death at this time, but you remember like when he died and there was like all these stories that were coming out about, you know, like there were the autobiographies or biographies or whatever about him. And, you know, there were a lot of stories that were coming out about like how his father raised him to where it was like, well, you can't just make this side of the fence look pretty. You got to make the side that we don't see also look pretty, right? Like I could totally relate to his father, right? Like that makes all the sense in the world to me. Like, oh yeah, of course, you know, because if somebody comes up on that side, you know, you still want to, you got to represent, right? It's still got to look good. So yeah, I feel like I'm pretty good at like following a detail through a complicated system and paying attention to that.
Yeah, I think we talked about you like having a hard time coming up with the strength, and like I just like instantly was like, well, here's 4, like no problem, and like that was number 1. Like, you know, it like took me like a quarter of a second to come up with like.
Oh, I didn't even remember you said that.
Yeah.
Oh, dang it.
Yeah,
Come up with another one.
And when we say detail oriented, also like edge cases, right? Like he thinks about the things that nobody else thought about. Like it is a strength. There's very few people that have that ability to think through a problem that thoroughly.
But yeah, I can't.
It's impressive.
I don't got it.
Well, I mean, part of my thinking on that, though, as it relates to our career, though, is that, you know, that I think there's like some kind of cliche saying or something like that, where it's like, you know, 80% of it is easy. It's the 20%, that final 20% crossing that finish line. That's what we get paid to do.
Yeah.
Right.
The devil's in
Like,
the details.
Yeah. The devil's in the details. That's the part that we're getting paid to do. So that's kind of like why it's just kind of been beaten into my head. You know, they're like, hey, pay attention to detail, right? Because it's the details that matter.
You ever heard that story from Van Halen where they were on tour and they had this like 100-page document? I'm sure you heard it. Yes. And like one of the items in this like 100 pages of stuff that they had to get ready for their arena shows was like no brown M&Ms.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah.
And the deal was they would come in, and if there were any brown M&Ms, it was kind of like a canary, because they would say, oh, obviously you didn't read our contract, and we've got pyrotechnics, we've got lights, sounds, all the stuff that needs to be done meticulously and done correctly. So if you can't get the M&Ms right, how am I supposed to trust that you got the big stuff right? Right? And I'll be like, whenever someone mentions that story, I'm always like, I know somebody who would have got those M&Ms right.
Dang straight.
Oh man, you put any kind of contract in front of me, my wife hates it because I've got to read the whole thing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's smart. I'm completely the opposite. My wife gets really mad at me.
Outlaw is the guy that you want and don't want on your pull request.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
For the same reason. Yeah.
You know, I meant to ask, like, I teased the flashcard things earlier and never did get to ask it. So this was one of the resources that John Washam, God, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And if I'm not, I'm so sorry. Put out there though, and it was another repo that he links off of, but he had like the normal. So you could basically, what he did was he created this whole site or app, and that you could spin up. It's even Dockerized. You could just spin it up, and it was a web app that you could use to test yourself. Flashcards. You can create your own, but he includes 2 different databases of cards that he already has loaded up. If you wanted to see like what he was testing himself with, and I didn't even load up the extreme one because just the normal one made me feel dumb, like trying to go through some of these. So let's see.
Let's do this on air and put us all on the spot. I love this.
Yeah. Well, let's make sure I'm not the only dumb one among us. I need to feel better about myself.
Oh, here we go.
What is the log of n factorial?
What?
Right?
Wait, hold on. Log of n factorial. Wouldn't
it just be n?
0?
N times the log of n.
Oh, of course.
N log n.
Yeah, it was like I guessed at that. Like that's something that I knew at one point, like how to figure that out, but not anymore, man.
Right.
Yeah. How about just a simple yes or no? So you got a 50-50 chance. Can you multiply a 3x2 and a 2x6 matrix?
Why not?
Why not?
No.
Joe had it.
Yeah, I mean,
the answer wasn't quite why not, but it was a yes.
Yeah, it was a yes.
Into the n log n, the n factorial one, like that's actually important. Like we talked about dynamic programming last time, and I could see how you could have an n factorial problem, know it's n factorial. So like, oh, I see a change here that's going to reduce the things that I'm looking at to a logarithm of what I'm currently looking at. I should be able to, from that point, be able to say like, oh, if this ran in an hour before, it's going to run in what now? But without like those polished chops, like that's not a question I could easily answer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch in here too about like patterns, like what's the proxy pattern? That I don't think that's a pattern that we've ever covered.
No. I mean, I know what proxies are usually used for.
Right.
So if you had to guess based off the name alone, you might say
you hand it off.
Yeah, some sort of go between it kind of. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna say translates, but almost like reflects,
passes it along.
Yeah.
So his definition that he has here is provides a surrogate or placeholder for another object to control access to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. It'd be nice to have that stuff on the tip of your tongue, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. How about this one? We've because we kind of talked about this one, or at least by name, this one has come up in the past couple episodes. What is the Bellman-Ford algorithm?
Traveling salesman, wasn't it?
Graph traversal, which would be what it's for. It's an algorithm that computes the shortest paths from a single source vertex to all the other vertices in a weighted diagram.
Isn't it funny that we've got 82 episodes in now? Each one represents like multiple hours of kind of dealing with different subjects in programming. Plus there's all the episodes that we didn't make or the things we talked about doing and then didn't do. And there's all the things we've talked about in Slack and then other things that, our various careers were like, 15 years a piece. And like, we get to the normal flashcards for Google interviews. We're like, N squared.
Right?
Don't know. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's so big.
Which one? Yeah. Which one's faster, Dijkstra's algorithm or the Bellman-Ford?
Dijkstra's is n to the third power, I think. It's 3 for loops. So I'm going to guess Bellman.
Algorithm garbage. I'm not answering this.
No. You got to answer.
Dijkstra's.
Okay. And Joe, you said?
I think it's Bellman.
Well, then Alan got it right.
Woohoo! Wow. So it's
But what's the advantage? Can you name the advantage?
Clue. No.
Joe?
No.
Bellman-Ford can handle graphs in which some of the weights, the edge weights, are negative numbers. Dijkstra, they have to be all positive numbers.
Oh. Yeah, when I said algorithms, I meant like, solving those puzzle crap questions.
Not named algorithms.
Right. But when I said algorithms, this was the kind of stuff that I was talking about.
Right.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
So like, graph traversal type problems, like knowing which one, when to use it, which one's better for what reason, blah, blah, blah.
All right. Well, dang. Yeah. Now you have a link in the show notes, right?
Yeah. I'll have a link to the flashcards as well as John's main, repo here, which when we first talked about it back in episode 48, I think the repo was named something along the lines of Google Interview University. And he ended up changing it over the years to just the coding interview university.
Nice.
And it's still a growing repo, but he has his parts of it. And then there's like other areas where he's like, hey, feel free to like add to here. So like some of the classes, so there's videos that he has references to that are like behind paywalls, like maybe alinda.com or something that is maybe seasonal on one of the learning platforms like a Udacity or something like that you can't always go to. And so, if you definitely can find something that is always available, like on YouTube, he would much prefer to have those resources available. And definitely if they are, have you ever seen how like on YouTube specifically, like you can find course lectures from Harvard or MIT or whatever that are, always available on YouTube, right? Like really those are too. Definitely preferred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, on one of the honorable mentions here, I had one like where you were saying the UI thing, at least the frameworks, like I'm pretty decent at UI stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it would have been funny if we would have done each other's, like, or could have kind of guessed what we were going to say. Like, I definitely would have pegged you for getting it done type stuff.
Yeah. Come hell or high water.
Well, I don't mean that. Just kind of having a good pragmatic sense for kind of balancing like the business needs and kind of keeping that the priorities the priority.
You know what? So let's do this. I think for you, I would have said,
I don't want to do this.
Ability to jump in and help people out in just about any situation. Like you do that well and a lot.
That's another one of those things. Like if there's like someone told me there's a bug or something that they're having a hard time with, like unless I'm up to my neck in something else, like it pains me to not kind of jump in. So like actually for my honorable mentions, I had like debugging and kind of ownership, because like those are two things. Like if there's a bug in my area, like so it says something weird happened, like I really want to know. But a lot of times I get kind of swamped and stuff, and so it kind of like, depending on how far down the death match I am, and whatever various project, like those strengths slip, which I hate. But I think that was definitely on my mind for something I was going to list.
For Outlaw, I would also say one of the strengths is just the ability to jump in on basically anything, like just and almost have. And it's sort of weird to say this, but almost have an empathy towards the problem, right? So understanding the pains that it's causing and what to do to resolve those pains. So I think it might be an extension of the detail oriented, but like literally, I mean, I can't think of many things that you haven't done in terms of just random freaking out there things, right? Like anything from DevOpsy type stuff to testing to process flows to setting up, build environments or whatever. Like just the ability to get in, understand a problem, and attack the problem.
But I kind of view that as different. I have a different take on that. And that's why this episode was also really one of the comments that I remember making to one of you guys or both of you guys that I had a really hard time about, because I kind of view myself as, if you've heard the expression, a jack of all trades, master of none. Like, so, I mean, to your point, like, yeah, I jump into something, but it's not like I don't feel like, remember we've had that conversation about, being the T-shaped developer,
mm-hmm.
right? And that's where it feels like, it's more like I'm a dash.
So,
like,
sorry, man, I can't let that stand.
I'm a big minus sign.
No, that's not true. You're a bucket. That is not a dash. That is.
It's not even a bucket. It's a barrel.
That's a thick honking dash, man. Yeah, like video processing, DevOps, machine learning, JavaScript. Like the other things I wrote to you the other day were like attention to detail, pitbull persistence, depth of understanding, and thoughtfulness. Like, when I said like kind of ownership, like that's not true, because like if something weird is happening on my app, I could let it go. You can't let it go. You want to know why it's happening, under what conditions, like what it is, like. And so I do think whether it's JavaScript or C# or SQL or whatever, like you can't just like be okay with something being weird or whatever. You always have to investigate. And that's why there's no way I would say a dash.
But that's a negative though. But that's a bad thing though.
No, disagree.
Like not being willing to walk away, to step away from something and move on to the next problem.
No, I disagree because we've talked about this stuff before, right? Like it's the pains that we've experienced as developers that make us as good as what we are now. Because we've experienced those pains, we have a better understanding of what we're walking into 90% of the time, not all the time. But I'll agree, right? Like you're the bucket-shaped developer. You're not the minus or the dash. Yeah. And I'll give a perfect example here. And this is real life example, right? So at our current gig, when we all first started doing this stuff, it was a small shop. Like when somebody said, hey, we need a build to give to a customer, it was literally go into Visual Studio, right-click publish, and produce the thing, right?
Like it is in a lot of small shops.
Exactly. And so a dash-shaped developer would be like, okay, well, I can automate this thing. I'll set it up to where it'll run MS Build, and then we're done, right? So that's where maybe the dash-shaped guy goes in there. He's like, okay, I got my DevOps piece, and I'm done. That's not Mike, right? Like when Mike got in there, he looked at it, he's like, I don't really like this hard-coded thing. Let me figure out how to get that out. I'm going to extract that out. Okay, I got that out, but I really don't like this because there's not a pattern here, right? Like I can't really make sense of this thing and nobody else will be able to make sense of it. Let me break it down into its constituent pieces and put it in a build pipeline so that everybody can look at the process and it's this nice, pretty tree, right? So that's where, and this is where I think it's important for people to really reflect on their strengths. It is real easy as developers, and man, I'm talking to everybody that does this stuff, to get lost in the fact that we're the 1%ers who understand this crap, right? When you talk to any other person outside of our profession, they know less than a fraction of what we do about how these things work. And so it's real easy because of our depth and breadth of knowledge to understand how much we don't know. But if you look on the other side of it, we have so much knowledge in this stuff that it's amazing when you think about how much you gain over time. And like what you're saying, you think you're a dash-shaped developer because you're all over the place, but I've never seen anything you've done that's been halfway on anything, right? Like when you touch something, you don't just touch it and walk away. You're going to make sure that it's left nice and tidy so that when you walk away, you feel good about the next person that came in behind you. And that's not a dash-shaped developer. That's not a thin T. That is somebody that took the time to be thoughtful about how it was set up, what it was going to do. And when you walk away from it, you don't have to think about it. And that's a big difference, at least in my opinion, because most people don't operate that way.
I guess like one of the things, like, okay, so going back to the what was it, the myth of the genius programmer kind of thing, right? Like there's definitely, I feel like we definitely work in a career path where it's very easy to have insecurities about certain things, right? And there's like all of these, like, the whole DC universe about, like, there's gods among us, right? Or because there's the people out there that are putting out the books, like Rob, for example, Rob Conery with the Imposter's Handbook. You have the John Skeet, you have Uncle Bob, like all these people that are putting out books, right? That are just, they're like the gods among us, right? And it's easy to feel kind of inadequate if you're not one of those people, right? I feel like I forget like everything. Like if after a week I've forgotten something, like already, like I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
Oh yeah.
But it's like, like even today, Alan and I were looking at some code that I had worked on. I don't even remember how long ago it was that I worked on that code. Yeah. But let's say it was a year plus, and there's so much of that, working with a third party API that was like I'd forgotten about.
Right.
And it like took me a while for like pieces to start coming back together. Right. It's that kind of thing, like that kind of gets to me every now and then. And it could be anything. It could be like a React. Joe brought up machine learning. It could be Python. Anything that you're not in daily, then I'll forget it.
Yeah.
And then that's where I get frustrated.
Yeah. And that's true. And I mean, to give one more, bro hug here before I finish it up, but like with Joe, right? It's the same type thing. And this is, I think, really what distinguishes elite developers from those that do a 9-to-5 job, right? Like, and I'm not being boastful in saying that I feel like the three of us are elite developers. We are. And the reason is because
my pull requests
because we care a lot. And an example, and Joe's joked about this in the past, right? Like, he'd walk away from a piece of code because he had to, but before he did, he'd write up a 3-page wiki document on, hey, these are the things that you need to know about this because, this is the state that it was arrived in, and this is what it needs to do, and you need this background knowledge, right, to do a handoff. Or even, he says he's not good at UI, but I've seen his UI, and I would argue the opposite, right? He may not know every framework on the planet, but it's just there's that level of care, and it's funny, man. So I had a VP at UPS that was probably one of my favorite people in the world, and I never actually heard him say this, but the guy was from New Orleans, from Louisiana, and his big thing was making sure people did lanyap. And
I'm sorry, he did what?
And I hope I'm saying this properly, but it's a French Cajun term for giving a little extra. He said that basically, when he was growing up in Louisiana, if you went to the butcher shop to get some meat, you were a local person. He was a local butcher, and he'd always add a little lanyap. He would basically give a little bit of extra meat. You paid for it. You walk away. And that is what elite developers do, not just in their code, but in understanding and presenting the solution to their code, right? Like if you know that a customer is going to be working in your application and they're working in batch, but yet you create screens where they have to one-click everything to go do it, you failed them, right? An elite developer takes it to the next level and says, I need to make this person's life better. Even though the requirement is to one-off these things, they think through a problem, they do it better. And like you said earlier, they paint the other side of the fence, right? Like, you're not walking into a landmine field when you're going in and looking at somebody's code. And I mean, that's something that, the honorable mentions, the dev strengths, those are almost things that you can't quantify, but is extremely apparent when you go walk into somebody's code that left it in that state.
Yeah, I don't know about that elite business for me, but I do know that the three of us definitely have a lot of heart and a lot of skin in the game. And that's why we do the podcast. That's why we interact with, technical environments, and, we put just a lot of heart into this stuff. That's why we do the show and participate in all the social stuff and whatever we do, go to meetups. And so, we just all care about it. And so I think that's a strength for us. And I also think if you're listening to a podcast on your commute when you could be listening to anything else in the world or watching YouTube or whatever, I think that that's probably one of your strengths too. And so let us know in the show notes. Like, we'd be really interesting to hear kind of your takes on the strengths and weaknesses. And we really hope that you enjoyed this episode too, because I kind of worry a little bit that people are going to hear it. It's like all these guys patting each other on the back all episode. So, I hope it's not terrible to listen to, because we enjoyed recording it, I think.
Nah, and if anything, I agree. I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that this was literally a pat on the back session, whereas it's more think internally, right? Like, we've talked about the imposter syndrome. We're talking about the imposter's handbook in the previous episode. It's real. It exists, right? Everybody feels it, probably, that you interact with day in and day out. Be aware of it, and just know that if you're trying your best and all that, then know that you're gaining knowledge, you're gaining skills and all that stuff. Gain confidence with it. Don't be cocky. Don't be arrogant. But it's real, and it's not literally just patting on the back. It's recognizing strengths and weaknesses, right? Like, we pointed out our weaknesses, and sometimes that's hard to do, right? Sometimes it's hard to reflect on that stuff, but it's a useful exercise.
Well, how about I'll put you guys on the spot, because Joe has done this to us before.
Uh-oh.
So it's my turn. I'm going to do this. So what if we say, hey, you've been listening to this. You write in a comment on this episode /episode 82 with your 2 strengths and 1 weakness, or 2 weaknesses, 1 strength. So take a honest, introspective look at yourself and think of 2 weaknesses, 1 strength, and we'll pick 1 winner and we'll get you a copy of the Imposter's Handbook.
Love it.
Yep.
I'm going to up the ante. Let's do 2.
2?
Let's do 2.
No. Got to do 3.
All right. We're going to do 3.
Right.
3 copies.
3 copies of the book. There you go, guys. So, yeah.
3 copies of the Imposter's Handbook.
Yep.
All right. Awesome.
Comments on codingblocks.net/episode 82.
Yeah, and just real quick, I wanted to mention too, like one thing that was really hard for me with picking up the strengths is like I know someone that is better than me in each individual like kind of subject or area I thought about. It's like, oh, I'm good at this. Well, so is this, you know. So it's kind of funny. Like, but I think that's the strength of the community. Like, I like that there's people that I know that are stronger in every area I can think of that I can go talk to, and so that's really nice. I'm really fortunate to have that. And if you don't have that, I recommend joining the Slack group and finding those people.
Oh, man, totally.
And if you don't know who those people are, ask.
Yeah, man, amazing. Go in there and say hi, and you'll be greeted by just killer people. Killer good people.
And real quick, so we talked about honorable mentions. I thought it'd be kind of fun to like ask about, we talked about our weaknesses and strengths. Like, are you guys actively working on any of those weaknesses or strengths that you kind of know about?
So kind of inspired by things that I think it was the practicing episode. I don't remember which number that was. But I've kind of got inspired to do that, the code wars for Python, and maybe take like everything that I've done with Python so far has been more around like machine learning. And there's definitely been like times where it's like, well, I got to just remember, figure out like, okay, how do I even splice up this matrix? Right. But I want to get better. I want to get more muscle memory at those kind of things. So I was like, well, you know what, let me take a different approach to this. And instead of like going after it from the kind of going with Alan's point about the targeted learning, rather than trying to, go at it from the point of view of like, hey, let's work on some machine learning problems. Instead, be like, hey, just focus on Python first, right? And then, get some more muscle memory, get some better muscle memory there. So I'm definitely going to be making more of an effort in that regards.
Yeah, I'd say for me, it's not all the time. I definitely will get an itch and sit down and watch one of the Stanford talks on YouTube on big O notation or, algorithms or something like that. I won't say that it's with any frequency or consistency, but there are definitely times that I will go out of my way to say, all right, I need to revisit this.
So for me, I would say that there are things I am definitely heavily pursuing, but they're not my weaknesses and they're not my strengths. So there's things that I want to be better at that I'm kind of feel like I'm more on the middle ground on, like code architecture, modularity, communication. I've been doing some speaking stuff this year, the podcasting, obviously, DevOps, and a little bit of the modern UI UX. But I just kind of thought it was funny. It's like, these are my biggest gaps, but I'm not working on them.
Oh, I agree with that. I definitely have more interest on the business side of things almost always. So, marketing, passive income, that kind of stuff. Like my mind tends to float towards things not developed because I think sometimes I just need a break from it,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. And that's another great point too. It's like, this is my own time. Like, I already got a day job I spend plenty of time at. We got a podcast we put plenty of time in. Like, if I'm doing some coding on the weekend or something, like, darn it, it's going to be fun.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, like, when you feel like you need something to get away from programming, though, that's what mountain biking is for.
That's right. And too, I just want to mention, like, it sounds like we're all kind of in the same boat where it's like, on my weekend time, my extracurricular time, like, I'm not really interested in getting my A's to A+, or my F's to D's, right? Like, I'm more interested in getting my C's to B's.
Right. I agree with that.
So, yep. I thought that was interesting. And actually, we took a whole bunch of notes on kind of how to get better and different ways of learning and different models and stuff, and Drivus models and learning pyramids and stuff. But we kind of ran out of time. So let us know if you're interested. And maybe if you're lucky, we'll talk about that in some future episode.
Oh, there's a decent amount here.
So for the resources we like, we're going to have a ton of links in here. The Imposter's Handbook is definitely going to be in here, but there's going to be a ton. I know I've got at least a dozen just in my notes alone, related to some of the things that I was finding. So we'll have a bunch of resources. We like a bunch of links to interesting articles, John's GitHub repository that I mentioned, as well as a link specifically to the flashcards. I meant to say this too. On his repo, he had a really good quote that I liked a lot. Successful software engineers are smart, but many have an insecurity that they aren't smart enough.
Mm-hmm. So true.
So with that,
hey, wait. I should put the resource in there that I was actually studying when I should have been doing these notes last night. Home theater speakers, right? Like I have links all over the place. I can share all those.
Yeah. Last night for me was PWAs.
Yes. People were putting real stuff in our chat, and I was like, man, I'm looking at speakers. I don't know what this is. All
right. Well, with that, it is time for Alan's favorite portion of the show. It's the tip of the week.
Oh, man, I forgot about this. All right, cool.
Now, for me, I've actually managed to catch up on just about all of my podcasts, so I had to go find a couple new ones. And I found one that just started actually called App Dev Diary, where there's two devs who are kind of going through they're discussing their journey on building a new guitar practice amp. And they are starting like right from the get-go, like, let's talk about what we want it to be. And like they're just getting started and they're kind of researching and figuring some things out with like how to play audio and JavaScript and stuff. And so it's really interesting. And I think if you like the show, you're probably going to like that show. So we'll have a link to it. It's called App Dev Diary.
Very nice. So mine, this one's kind of interesting. And Mike and I were actually talking about this right before the show, and it had features that I wasn't even aware of. So there is is it a plugin? It's a marketplace thing for Visual Studio Team Services. And basically what it is, it's a package management plugin, we'll call it. Now, there's two sides to this. There's the awesome side, and then there's the not awesome side. So there's a link in the show notes for it, but it allows you to sort of easily first host a NuGet feed in your own VSTS environment, so you can have a private NuGet feed. You can also have it auto-package particular projects into NuGet packages for you, which you can have in pre-release mode, you can have in debug mode, you can have in release mode, you can version them, semantic versioning, all this kind of stuff. It also supports NuGet, NPM, Maven. Pretty awesome things. I've seen Pluralsight videos on it. I've seen it in practice. Now, here's where I will tell you it kind of stinks. If you look at the reviews on it, there are currently 141 reviews at about 2 1/3 stars. The reason it's 2 1/3 stars is because it's a paid plugin, which people are really mad about, and I kind of think rightfully so. So basically, you get 5 user licenses for free. So if you have 5 people on a team that are using VSTS and this NuGet package or this package management thing, then you get it for free. But for every person over 5, you have to start paying a monthly fee for. So that is what the negative reviews are. It's not about the functionality of it. It's all about the fact that, people feel like Microsoft should be paying for it or not forcing people to pay.
Yeah, I hate that part of it.
It's ridiculous.
In team services speak, it's an extension.
Okay.
Is what they call it. And there's like a whole marketplace of extensions that you can add into Visual Studio Team Services, and this is one. And unfortunately, if you want to have a managed hosted NuGet environment, then that integrates in with Team Services, then this is the way to go. And it really feels like Team Services should just include this.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that you should have to pay for it. And this is made by and published by Microsoft. And it's just like, come on, man.
Yeah,
we're already paying for Team Services.
It's really frustrating. I mean, when I say that it should be an essential thing that's already baked in, because what it allows, and I'm not even making this clear, is you can take projects that are dependencies in your other projects and tell it, hey, this project, I want this to be NuGetized, right? And it'll version it and do all that stuff for you automatically. Like you can have it when a commit goes in, it will go build the thing, create the NuGet package, publishing pieces for you, and it just gets used in your projects. And the next time somebody does a run on their system, it'll pull down the NuGet package and run it. Super useful, incredibly frustrating that they charge for it. But if you're not aware of this thing and you have an environment where dependencies are kind of a pain in the butt, check it out.
Yep. So you too can have diamond dependencies.
Exactly. And if you don't know what we're talking about, good for you.
So mine, I thought I would play in Alan's favorite land, which is SQL. So, oh, come on. You love data.
I do love data.
So I don't know that we've talked about this lately, but with SQL Server 2016 and later, Microsoft has been introducing some little sugary goodness into T-SQL. And I'm sure that there's like a whole bucket list of things that Joe wants that still hasn't been added. But there have been some cool ones. So I thought, I don't know if we talked about it, so maybe we should. But a couple that were noteworthy, and I'll have links to like more you can find, but a couple that I wanted to just call out specifically was like, you remember the old way of, okay, I want to see if this table already exists, so I'm going to have to like check if the object ID exists, blah, 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 right? Select from the table, see if this thing is already there. All right. Well, now you have drop table if exists, right? So you can just say drop table if exists and whatever your table name is, right? Which is totally awesome, right? And that one I thought like maybe we've already talked about that one, but the one that like caught my attention is yesterday I was talking with a coworker and I saw one of her some of her SQL that she had on screen, and I was like, holy crap, is that legit SQL that I'm looking at? Because it said create or alter procedure, and I was like, wait a minute, that was a new feature that was added in 2016.
That is nice.
So I just thought basically that the main takeaway from that was like, I got to pay more attention to these SQL Server updates to see like what's changing in T-SQL so I can catch up on all these new syntax features.
Nice.
Can you order by a variable yet?
See,
No.
I told you. I knew Joe wasn't going to be satisfied.
Stop with this pipe dream stuff, man.
It's not. This shouldn't be a pipe dream. All right.
The pain.
Alrighty.
But let's also, in fairness, keep in mind that SQL Server is a transactional database. It is not a reporting database. So yeah, maybe it shouldn't exist, and maybe people shouldn't be trying to force it to do that.
Yeah, I saw a great talk from Santosh over here in Orlando talking about NoSQL for SQL, and it wasn't just you should use NoSQL talk. It was a really great kind of talk about like the strengths and weaknesses of NoSQL versus kind of traditional relationship. Anyway,
cool.
We should talk about that sometime.
Yes, we should. I think it's a great topic. All right. Cool.
Yeah, so that's it for the episode. We talked about identifying our weaknesses and filling in the gaps and the kind of stuff that we're working on. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we hope that you go to the comment section and drop your 2 weaknesses and 1 strength for a chance to win one of the 3 copies of the books that we're giving away that we hadn't planned on.
That's it. We'll all pitch in a few bucks. We'll be good.
Yeah. All right. So with that, if you're not already, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify.
Oh, yes. We forgot to add that in there.
Player FM, Overcast, Google Play, iHeartRadio. Yep. We're basically everywhere. And if you found us on someplace that we're not mentioning, that's not listed on our header, let us know. We'll add it there too. Be sure to leave us a review. You can head to www.codingblocks.net/review to find some helpful links.
Yep. And while you're up there, check out all our show notes. They are extremely full and well featured. Examples, discussions, and more.
And send your feedback, questions, and rants to the Slack channel, codingblocks.slack.com. We're going to be having some more community talks coming up. So if you're interested, you should join in there too. We've got a channel we're going to be talking about and scheduling and figuring out how to do more of those on a timely basis. And, we're on Twitter or anywhere else, at Coding Blocks. So check out the website and you can find links to just about anywhere you want to be.